You're watching Hearthstone Grandmasters. Our first match of the day is about to get going. And as Gia so beautifully highlighted in our intro, it's going to be a great opportunity to see Glory in action. He was obviously one of the cornerstones of the strongest practice group. I think it's fair to say that we had last season with all three of Glory, Possessi, and Alutemu. However, this season, something for Alutemu, as we saw from some pretty unfortunate outcomes yesterday, isn't working, along with Possessi also not having the best run of it, although very narrowly avoiding out on Division A for him. Something has to be going right here for Glory. And what are you thinking in terms of his lineup? Is there anything especially intriguing going on?
Definitely that Rogue catches my eye, the other deck that we could consider highlighting, because this is a less popular variant of Rogue, not just this week, but for the past few weeks indeed. Glory, however, I think in week 1 was one of the players to bring this more aggro stealth package Rogue with the Ashtongue Slayers, with the Burrowing Scorpids, and now with Infiltrator Lillian. It definitely can get under the skin of some of the slower decks in the meta, but it has less ability to answer or come back from removal, I would say, especially now that the field has priests that are running double Wild Pyromancer.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say, which is why I'm sure he'll be fairly happy that there is no priest on the other side. What there is there on the other side for che0nsu is a Bomb Warrior, which is kind of a rare sight to see not banned away at the moment, with Warrior definitely feeling like the premium ban, very strong against the aggro decks and having a lot of game against the control decks. But instead, Glory decided to ban away che0nsu's Mage, which was a Turtle Mage, which I've got to be honest, I find pretty surprising. I felt like Glory actually had a decent time against the Mage. The Priest is bad, yes, I will grant you that. You are in a tough spot with Highlander Priest against Mage. But Demon Hunter, surely you can just kind of smack him in the face and they die. And the same applies with the aggro rogue as well.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising to me indeed. We didn't have all that much time to watch Turtle Mage in APAC because it had its very first debut yesterday.
Yeah.
And so the matchup spread is not something we can talk about with that much expertise. I will trust Glory to have, done the testing for himself. And it could very well be that he just sees this as the most threatening deck, because I think that Glory's lineup is pretty well positioned to deal against Bomb Warrior anyway, because he's running the double oozes in that Demon Hunter. He has the Ooze Sticky Finger package in Priest, and even this aggro rogue, surprisingly, can get the job done before Warrior can get together the Risky Skipper Armor Smith combo.
You know what else can get the job done? che0nsu in a hat. You've seen him with his regular power level, but never before with that quite impressive hat. Where did this come from?
I don't know, Derek, but I'm happy. I just could not stop smiling when I saw that on camera. I mean, a lot of people have been putting on some swag. I'm pretty sure Thai started the trend over in EU recently, so che0nsu following suit. You just gotta love the confidence.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Monsanto in Americas with his hat, Tice with his hat, and now che0nsu with his. I mean, I'm going to do it. I'm going to throw our producer under the bus. If you saw our intro where I called up the wrong deck, our producer was so distracted by the swag of che0nsu's hat, he literally could not load up the right deck. That's the power that this man is now wielding.
Well, it's a lot of power in the hat, but Glory's hand is quite something to behold. I saw Ooze and Sticky Finger in the opener. So it's looking scary for che0nsu, and already we have to talk about just how heavy he is leaning into the weapon package. Of course, the natural double wrench calibers are there, but the Horde Pillager is only 1 copy, so essentially 3 pieces of weapon removal are necessary from the priest. And we did see yesterday that if it's just 2, the warrior can still get there.
That is exactly right. The Horde Pillager makes all the difference, because just 2 wrench calibers, already Glory has won the game, if that's the case. There is nothing that the deck can do to beat that, really, if both of those are destroyed. The real kicker, though, in this instance for me, is whether or not the Galakrond package is being run. And che0nsu is not running Galakrond in this deck, which is miles apart. After the weapons have been destroyed or stolen here by Glory, the follow-up will be significantly weaker from che0nsu, because he is instead including cards like Evil Quartermaster for a bit more early game defensive maneuvers, which is terrible in this matchup, it's got to be said.
Yeah, that is right. che0nsu's list is tacked much more towards aggressive strategies, and already the Sticky Finger taken away that wrench caliber. And even though I did say initially that the Priest would want 3 pieces of weapon removal ideally. That's only if the Warrior actually manages to draw into the weapons consecutively. And we saw che0nsu only had the 1 Wrench Caliber from Corsair Cash. He doesn't have the second one, nor the Horde Pillager. Not that the Horde Pillager would even summon anything at this point.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that che0nsu at this point is already mauled as a hatter, because this is going absolutely awful. Can it go any worse than this in the matchup?
I can't really imagine that much worse of a situation. Has just managed to curve out on top of putting together the weapon removal already. che0nsu forced to go for a Barov.
Yeah.
An impressive battle rage.
Draw a couple of cards. Again, what this all revolves around for che0nsu is finding the second Wrench Caliber, praying the weapon removal isn't there. When it is, in fact, there, it's about keeping on drawing and finding the Horde Pillager and praying that that is finally the weapon that does, in fact, stick.
It's really rough because even with that 1 bomb draw from Glory, that means che0nsu's Dr. Boom is not even active for the next turn. He could just try and stall with these double brawls in hand for a minion-based game plan, but I think he's going to get very comfortable in that instance and just refill with their other value generating tools.
Keeping on with the tempo here as well. I think absolutely right. You know, this is what we see more from Druid, I think it's fair to say, than Priest against Warrior, but it's a very strong strategy. If they have to spend their mana on clearing your board instead of developing their weapons, they are not going to be getting anywhere near lethal.
Well, that's the second Corsair Cash for che0nsu now, but he is gonna get the bad news about this Ooze following up. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like the Mindrender Elutia will not even be necessary because Glory has been so far ahead. Yesterday we saw Alan trying to time it at the perfect spot to steal away possibly Blastmaster Boom from the other side, but it was just a little bit short.
Yeah, and I think for the moment, Glory can just quite happily not go for the Mind Render. This game plan is working at the moment. He doesn't need anything fancy thrown in there to potentially mess with his equations, because right now, he's got the Ooze. The only thing that he is afraid of at all is the Horde Pillager. Maybe he'll go for the Mind Render next turn to try and draw it and snipe it, whatever. But for the moment, he's just happy.
Yeah. I also like this, not getting carried away with overextending with the Karj and possibly Sethek, because Glory knows that this is more than enough pressure to put down che0nsu, and the wider he goes, the more likely che0nsu can get a good brawl out of it, and suddenly Glory's game plan is not completely destroyed, but delayed a little bit.
That's a reasonable draw there in terms of trying to get up the armor total to shield slam this Kronk, and at least buy him some breathing room, because that should be the last big threat for a while from Glory's Highlander Priest. It's not turn 9, so Dragon Queen Alexstrasza can't come down yet, and then he can che0nsu can reevaluate then. How does he turn this one around and give himself any chance of swinging it back?
Did he point this Ankar face? That's pretty interesting. I was definitely looking at starting with shield block, and then depending on what the draw is, he could go for like a mini skipper clear on the Ooze and the Kronks, using the shield. But looking at it this way, I think che0nsu's gonna go for a brawl instead.
Yeah, I mean, he could still go face to draw the Horde Pillager, or try and draw it, and then shield block, trade and shield slam, and just leave up the Ooze.
I'll show you who's boss.
Okay. That was a much more complex clear than I thought we would see, but it does get the job done, and the upside of saving the shield block, I suppose, is something of a surprise factor against Glory. Oh, Boom. Active for 2 bombs.
Glory does not see the pirate, so he doesn't know whether or not there's a Horde Pillager in hand at the moment that was drawn off of the Ankar. But, I mean, yeah, like you say, he's getting more and more information about what is there, and for the main point, he's also just killing his opponent very, very quickly.
Yep. Didn't have the second armor smith to make use of this.
So Bladestorm clears off some of the damage, but then there's no follow-up. No minions to go alongside Risky Skipper, apart from, I suppose, Blastmaster Boom, which doesn't sound all too impressive.
Yeah, it's looking like we're gonna see a brawl potentially.
Made to fit.
At the very worst, well, if the brawl misses, he doesn't have enough mana to go Skipper plus Horde Pillager after, so at the very worst, it's a Blade Storm to clear off all the minions. Okay, so we'll just leave the Armor Smith up with Skipper Pillager, I think.
That feels pretty awful. Like, that's 3 armor that's being gained immediately, very possibly more to come thereafter. I suppose Brawl, if it survives, it's just a lot of mana expended on something that didn't really do all that much.
Everything did feel quite terrible there, but che0nsu just needed to make sure that he could survive past a potential apotheosis. There's a single bomb in che0nsu's deck by my count.
Yes, I believe you're correct. Okay. Glory using that while he can to try and just finish off the game right now, because this weapon, despite, you know, it only being the last one that it's possible for che0nsu to get, it could be enough to get the job done this game.
Oh!
Or
Oh my
maybe
goodness,
not.
1 HP to work with. No way to gain armor outside of the hero power. And 2 boom bots on the board.
So, if you go Deathwing Dragon Lord, there's too much attack on the board. You have to trade first. Hope it hits that. Okay, okay. He's possibly alive here.
Possibly. Where is this bomb going? Okay, 1 HP. Oh my goodness.
And so, obviously now it's turn 10. We are anticipating Mind Render into Blastmaster because he knows it to be in hand.
Indeed.
Unless he
Do
thinks
I get-
tanking the 12 is too much.
Well, he would just hand che0nsu Time Rip. So that's very...
I think it's more just the potential of dying, right? Like, clearing off the Blastmaster Boom, you really don't care about at all because they're so close to just dying.
I mean, he'll know whether they can kill you or not because you give them their hand. So on that situation, you're scared of Soul Mirror that Glory would give.
Well, I mean, I think what my point is that you're afraid of them hitting you in the face with the 12 attack Deathwing, swinging with the weapon, and then you die
Just
to
drop
bombs in a
bombs.
couple turns. Yeah.
True.
I mean, it wouldn't have been possible on that turn, though, right? Because he swaps decks. Well, I guess it would swap back at the start of his turn. It gets complicated very quickly, as always, with Mind Render.
Indeed. I think there's 1 bomb apiece in the deck right now. Obviously, che0nsu needs to deal with the Sethek because he can't armor out of range of it. So a Blade Storm plus a Brave Boom and just pray they
Yeah.
don't have Soul Mirror is that.
I definitely think it's time for a Brave Boom. You gotta go, right? This game is reaching its finish very quickly.
There's a small consideration for deliberately going for less caboose on the boom
On.
just to play around Soul Mirror. But I say that it sounds pretty awful.
It's just going with the
Well,
brawl.
instead of Blade Storm, I thought he was gonna Blade Storm to get. Obviously, it wouldn't work if the Sethek would survive if you had arm board.
I mean, I think the main thing there for che0nsu is he's avoiding playing Blastmaster Boom at this point because he's on such a low health total that if Soul Mirror was played, he straight up loses the game. But the downside of that is if he doesn't play Blastmaster Boom, it just gets stolen by Mind Render, and then he dies to all the boom bots on the other side, for which che0nsu, Glory knows there is no answer, and he just draws the bomb anyway. That's going to be game 1 over. It was a delayed reaction from che0nsu to try and pull out a win of that game. But in the end, double weapon destruction, it's just too strong.
Got a little messy towards the end, as it always does with these niche of possible moves, but yeah, the early game from Glory was just too much to overcome. The Ooze and the Kobold Sticky Finger right there from the very beginning kind of just spell Glory, I think, is not afraid whatsoever to leave up Warrior. However, this is Conquest, so it's not like the Warrior, he'll never have to face it again. He'll have to run up into it most likely with one of the remaining decks.
Indeed, yeah. That's where things get a little bit scarier for Glory, because I think the rest of his archetypes start to fare a little bit worse against the warrior. The double weapon destruction priest is very, very nice. The double ooze in the demon hunter, though, of course, could help things. And I guess maybe the aggro rogue, he likes his shot against the warrior. I think that is a significantly worse deck against warrior than the weapon rogue is, which has the longevity that self-sharpening sword, or SSS, affords you in that matchup. But you can still very much get underneath all of their armor gain with the early stealth and aggression that you're throwing down. We'll have to see whether it is going to be the Demon Hunter or the Rogue that Glory wants to go for next, which he feels like his best chance of taking down the Warrior is. But before we find that out, we're going to go to a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to find out Glory versus che0nsu, who's going to get their first win of Division A on the table. You are watching Hearthstone Grandmasters here for the Asia-Pacific region. We got che0nsu and Glory up now. Obviously, Glory is our representative already going through to the World Championships later this year. The kind of the culmination of each season of Grandmasters is we send one player per region through to the World Championships to happen at the end of the year, which means we get 6 players altogether from Grandmasters, then 2 from the Chinese internal system. Obviously, last year culminating in a victory for Lion, very historic and impressive victory, no doubt. And who knows how things are going to shake out this year. Maybe it is Glory's year to stamp his name in Hearthstone history at long last. But one player who's giving him a very good run for his money is che0nsu, who has, in his own right, been putting in a lot of work and showing some impressive results recently.
That's right. che0nsu tweeting out that his current practice group with Rivius and Dawn had produced them the best results in the previous week of specialists. I think all three of them making it to the top 8 with Burgle Rogue, which is now one of the most brought archetypes in the field. So definitely kind of spearheading that development in the APAC meta. And che0nsu himself has been putting in some extremely impressive ladder results. I think he's among the most active in terms of just jamming hours on the ladder. Some people will argue that that doesn't necessarily translate into tournament results, but it does mean that he'll know how to play decks from his perspective inside and out.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of have personal experience with this. I socialize with some of the players a lot. A lot of them are currently trying to build their lineups for Masters Tour Montreal to be played next week. And, you know, I can offer my help in terms of how I think decks should be played. But because I'm not a tournament player, I just play a lot on ladder, I have very little advice for how a cohesive lineup should be brought together and how your ban strategy should be working and things like that, which I think, you know, is, as you say, a direct result of needing to not only play on ladder, but also go in practice games and sesh out these fake tournament matches that you can simulate.
And one of the decks that I don't see very often on ladder, but is now here appearing in the tournament format, is this aggro rogue from Glory, with the full stealth package now featuring Akama and Infiltrator Lillian. I think it's a slightly more refined version to before, but already you're seeing the weakness to any whirlwind effect, essentially. Priest with Wild Pyro, Skipper from che0nsu, or even Mali Druids with Swipe.
Yeah, this is not it. You know, this is not what you want to see. Having to spend a deadly poison to kill off an armor smith here is pretty devastating, but otherwise they're just going to gain way too much armor. It has to be done here for Glory. I will say, in top 5 moments last week or the week before, I can't remember, we did see Monsanto take a win with Aggro Rogue against a double armor smith risky skipper play from his opponent. He managed to take down both of them over the course of the game, but it's not easy. This is undeniably already an uphill climb for Glory.
Indeed. Glory's deck does one thing and one thing only, so you need to make sure that when you do have decisions, you absolutely nail them. And here is one that he makes right away. We could have seen double Spectral Delinquent come down, but he's prioritizing the Akama, despite having seen one Skipper already. I would have to wager that he wants to save one as an activator for Hook Scimitar next.
Bladestorm getting interesting there. I mean, there's no Edwin in the deck, so Bladestorm is not going to be saved for a bigger single target minion. It's really just the fact that he knows with double Spectral Delinquent in hand that he's going to have cheap minions on the board with 1 health. So I actually do like holding onto the Bladestorm here and tanking the 3 damage.
Pretty crazy that he also just generated Taki and has Lord Barov, so that's essentially effects if he needs them. But we're to the point of the game where Rogue at this point, it's kind of optimistic to assume that you get to stick any minion with 1 health for more than 1 attack. So Glory gonna be focusing the majority to the face. Infiltrator Lillian, a good minion on curve to follow up with Glory. I feel will need a secret passage to really get over the top here.
Yeah, it's definitely looking that way. He, well, I mean, Secret Passage, or I guess at some point in the game, Karma Prime, it's usually seen as a 3-4 with stealth with a downside, because the Karma Prime is just not a very good minion most of the time. But in this matchup, when you draw it off the top, it could actually just be insane! What?
Hello?
This is the first time I've ever seen a Karma Prime in a competitive Hearthstone game.
Me too, and che0nsu just used his Bladestorm.
And his Barov!
Okay, well now he's just trying to race Glory 3 bombs in the deck. I guess that's where we're at now. This is the world we live in.
I mean, he's done more damage over the course of this game than Aggro Rogue has.
It is very crazy. Glory can sap. Okay, Secret Passage. Can he put together 13 damage from 6 mana? It doesn't feel like it.
Avis, he's not even, like, Avis, Ashtongue is 11 damage. That's not there.
And he didn't sap first, so this boom is just sticking unless he wants to trade the Akama into it with the Ash Tongue, which
Yeah.
I guess that works. You get immune, but he's facing down so much damage on the other side, and if che0nsu can proc the bombs, then he's pretty much just dead.
Ash Tongue trade, and then... I mean, that is another thought, right? You could just try and keep everything stealthed so that he possibly can't clear anything?
Yeah, so he can't trade in the Barov, so are you supposed to just
Oh,
stab
you're just
your
dead.
own Ash Tongue, right? Or-
Yeah. I mean... Technically, you're alive then if you kill off Boom and you left...
What? Why stab Boom? Oh, is he just dumping it? Doesn't want to top deck it from Secret Passage?
I kind of feel like the play there was backstab your own Ash Tongue. Or maybe...
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Okay, well, that Akama just soaked so much from the immune, which is a pretty funny interaction, but che0nsu just has lethal Horde Pillager upgrade.
Oh
Cobalt
my God.
Lackey.
That's just it. 6 damage straight up, and che0nsu in a whirlwind of a game equalizes us at 1 game apiece. Even when drawn on curve against Bomb Warrior, Akama Prime was still not very good.
I mean, it did get a lot done. I would say if that came down the same time it did, but che0nsu didn't have the skipper early clear, then we could have been looking at a very different story. But again, you do have to be very optimistic that your stealth minions can deal that much damage. I wouldn't say it's very unlucky whatsoever that che0nsu had the answer to the double sneaky delinquent.
Yeah, that's where the game was really won. It was the combination of clearing the board and then having the perfect curve of Corsair Cash into the Wrench Caliber into a timely Blastmaster Boom for full activation onto the board. Super difficult to come back against that, even with the hyper-aggressive approach that Face Rogue does throw down. I think it does just... It shows what Bomb Warrior is, right? It's not a control archetype. It doesn't play for tempo necessarily in the early game against the aggro matchups, but its win condition isn't fatiguing. It's just killing your opponent on the backswing, and perfectly shown there by che0nsu with a strong backswing from Blastmaster Boom. And aggro Rogue just not getting the job done at all against the Warrior there.
Indeed. Glory, he has another deck that's similar to Warrior, though, even though the Warrior was banned out in this Demon Hunter. At first, we were touting it as a control deck because it runs some control packages like Blade Dance, but the vast majority of the deck is damage that can be sent wherever you like, and a lot of the time it just stacks up to race against these aggro decks. But it does seem like Glory is going to go for another try on the aggro rogue up against Burgle Rogue, which I feel like on paper I would assume that the faster rogue would have the advantage.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Like, the extra removal tricks that Rogue can throw down with Vendetta in particular are not generally going to be well suited against Rogue, because there's 1 health guys that is going to go face a whole bunch. But they do struggle with reactivity. You know, for che0nsu, 1 decent spell off of Wand Thief, if he can get Ice Barrier, Arcane Explosion to clear off the board, or a big Edwin towards the start of the game, this can definitely go either way.
And if you just want to straight up compare the way that Rogue wins compared to Warrior, if these minions are small enough, like 1 HP, then Rogue's best way to get rid of them is generally Dagger. They want to do that. They want to just take the damage in the early game to try and set up for a late game swing. But if you take too much damage against aggro Rogue this early on, a lot of the time you won't have the time to actually put down a big threat. So we could be seeing just 6/6 Edwin come down right now instead of the Dagger up.
I'm a big fan of the 6/6 Edwin here. Like, even if they have Ash Tongue Slayer, they still have to trade in the other 2/1 here, right, to kill it off with the +3 damage. Like, it only attacks into 1 thing at a time, which is undeniably the downside. But I feel like with the follow-up of Shadow Jeweler +1/2 into Secret, chaining Secrets, the curve was just very smooth there for che0nsu.
Well, with the pickup of, I would assume, Devolving Missiles here, he does still have an activator on turn 4 for one of the 3-drops, because I assume this Hanar is just coming down as a decent shaped minion to answer to 2/1s, and so is the one. Different line for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's reasonable, right? Because if your Edwin is a trading stick, you've effectively made like a 3/6 there, because there's nothing bigger than 3 health in the deck, which makes it seem a lot less impressive, of course, and going wide is nice in its own right.
Indeed. Glory with a deep breath there. I'm not sure if he was happy or sad to see this. I mean, Burrowing Scorpion is a good on-curve play for the next turn, and he has Secret Passage, so I think it's a pretty good hand.
Yeah, Passage is the big kicker there. I think given that he's got a value-heavy hand, relatively speaking for the aggro rogue, of course, he can afford to trade here. He wants to be locking down the board against his opponent, because just face damage here, I think, is probably not going to get it done in the face of Hanar's secrets.
And the downside of che0nsu's play of all the cheap stuff last turn is that this turn is very, very weak. He does have that Devolving Missile saved to combo out with either Miscreant or Edwin, but it's gonna be kind of scary if he doesn't hit the Burrowing Scorpion.
Okay. Goes with the snap Miscreant there. Was the potential for Burrowing Scorpion if he could have missed any of the tempo lackeys with Kobold and Goblin being the ones to hit, but he gets them. And he's in a great spot because of
Whoa! That's a draw. Goblin is insane. Funny thing is, though, he kind of wants to just dagger to get rid of this Miscreant and then play Ash Tongue.
I mean, I was saying he can't go for the raw damage approach. If he commits 12 to the face this turn, surely then you can.
Yeah, and thinking about it again, he knows that he gave che0nsu a Burrowing Scorpid, so it doesn't matter whether or not he gets rid of the Miscreant. There will be an answer in hand from che0nsu, so I definitely like just committing all the damage. Rogue cannot heal. Best he can do is try and discover Ice Barrier.
Yep, lucky. Trying to
way.
find Titanic is a big deal here.
I mean, Glory can get rid of the Miscreant, but that's 4. That's not going to the face. Sap! Okay, so if you just go Sap, Sinister Strike, Passage, you have 2 more mana to work with, and Eviscerate is 1 short of lethal. So maybe just save the Sinister Strike. Just go Sap Passage.
I think he's just going to go
Oh,
for
he's saving the
waiting
Passage
for
altogether. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting, right?
This
because
allows him to just pick up double Evis or Evis Sinister Strike on the next turn.
Right,
It doesn't play around second taunt, but I think on average it works out a little bit better.
Speaking of second taunt, though, Shadow Step there is ready to come down on, obviously, the Titanic Lackey to buff up Edwin, Questing Adventurer, whatever he wants to make nice and big, and then taunt up. It's a huge deal.
Yep. Questing will end up with more health than the Miscreant, so we'll get the taunt. But Glory has so much time, right? Even if he doesn't hit the lethal this turn, che0nsu is not representing lethal for another few turns.
Yeah, so many ways to get over the top of taunts. Doesn't even need to deal with it necessarily. He's got Abyss, Burrowing Scorpid, Sinister Strike, Sap as well, just to clear it off straight away.
Even if he doesn't get it, there's just Sneaky Delinquent, Greyheart Sage to draw more, but there's the Sap, and second Abyss, and the Aggro Rogue does outpace the Burgle Rogue.
Yeah, tough choice there at the start for che0nsu as to whether he goes for the Edwin or goes a little bit wider with Hanar and the 1-1. Upon closer inspection, I am actually, I think, a bigger fan of his line than I originally thought. At first, I was just thinking, you know, Edwin, you throw it down and you can counter pressure, very possibly. But with just a 6-6 in play, it's probably not quite enough to go for the counter pressure lethal approach. You're still relying instead on clearing the board. And so because of that, just going wide, I think is good recognition from che0nsu, even if the Edwin didn't even come down at all that game.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. If the Hanar did manage to get a couple of value trades and stick for a bit longer, that also could have been really huge because he could put secrets in the way, Noble Sacrifice, Ice Barrier could have made a huge difference at any point there towards the end. But I do think on average that the Burgle Rogue is very well positioned to just beat down any of the slightly greedier rogue archetypes. It does mean now, however, that Glory only has his Demon Hunter to win with. Sorry, Priest? Is this a bit of a bug that we're seeing?
I think... no, he won with the Priest in game 1, right? So he's got Demon Hunter, just the Demon Hunter left, yes. In order to take a win with, which is, I think, a pretty good deck to have left. You know, against the Zoo in particular, left from che0nsu, I think it could be in a great spot to take that win because we saw that matchup yesterday going a lot closer than we thought it would. But the combination of Zoo dealing damage to itself and Demon Hunter dealing damage to the Zoo generally equals a dead Warlock.
Yes, you do it a lot of the time, but there are situations where when the Zoo player is extremely seasoned and knows exactly how much damage they can take, Tom6029 always comes to mind when I talk about players who know
Mm.
how loosely they can play with their health total. Sometimes they can get down the Flesh Giants at right at the nick of time and pull back the game in a single turn. But yeah, Flesh Giant is indeed a key card in this matchup.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, you know, I was saying it yesterday. I think that what Demon Hunter struggles to is the big minions. Blade Dance is the way to clear it off, and they struggle to consistently get it down. But what they also struggle to deal with is the perfect starting hand. Tour Guide on one. Although I guess maybe you go for the Spirit Jailer and just save the Tour Guide. But the point is, the Merchant discards the Hand of Gul'dan, and then you pop off.
It's interesting, right? So upside of Tour Guide on one obviously is because you have your turn 2 locked up. It means that if you draw Dark Flare off of the Hand of Gul'dan or your natural draws by then you can just go Dark Flare tap immediately and potentially pop off from there. But if you're talking about Glory's on average best turn 1 play, which is a Spirit Jailer, obviously you don't want to feed your 1/1 to the 1/3. But if you think about Zoo's overall win condition, which is not really caring so much about taking all the best value. Oh no! Oh no!
Did che0nsu not realize that that was going to happen? It looked like he didn't realize. I've got to be honest.
I don't know.
He played
There's
it so
definitely reason
fast.
for still just ripping it, though. It could be that he's just seen that situation before.
It's definitely not strictly wrong at all. Having two giants is pretty good. But what I will say is, I think on that turn, I would have probably gone tap Jailer and try and tap my way down to having a cheaper giant than 6 mana, because this is now looking quite a lot scarier for che0nsu.
That's really rough. I definitely would agree with the idea of if you're going to be multiplying the giants, you want to fit in the tap every single turn, which means that if you draw the second Merchant or the Nightshade Matrons, then you have a better chance of, or rather, you get to sooner guarantee that you discard Hand of Gul'dan. Now we're seeing che0nsu multiplying even more giants. Okay.
Well, it's consistent, if nothing else. You know, I think that time he was undeniably aware, and very possibly the first time as well. But it does mean he needs to find another discard effect if he wants to get rid of these Hands of Gul'dan.
We could just be seeing an alternate game plan where he doesn't even draw and just plays out cards on curve. I mean, the Shadow Light is looking pretty fine this turn.
That's true.
Gets rid of the ooze.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. What?
His deck is
How
taunting
come this
him.
Zoo hand costs so much?
I mean, it kind of costs so much, and at the same time, it kind of costs 0 if the hand plays correctly.
Okay, a Raise Dead off the top could drastically change the story here. Glory, you've not even talked about his turn so far because it's been business as usual. Just remove, stay on board. He hasn't had a great window to play the Shard Shatter Mystic because he's been ahead on board this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, the only talking points here are like whether he could have just gone face there instead, because you do want to be playing pretty aggressively for face damage in the matchup and allowing your Shard Shatter and Blade Dance to clear off the minions afterwards. But I imagine that's what he'll transition over to. I mean, even here, literally just Twin Slice plus Blade Dance is pretty insane.
Or ignore it all.
Or
With
even
this Barrow Slice top deck, he is just rushing down che0nsu, has Glaive Bound and Twin Slice for... And che0nsu has no defense. Needs to hit a taunt.
He's just dying. Straight up. That's the tap. Yikes.
No soul fragments picked up. That is a disaster. For che0nsu, he's just praying that there's somehow no damage in Glory's hand and you put down a Flesh Giant here, but it is so likely that you're dead.
That game was like the uncanny valley of Hearthstone. Like that was so nearly a Hearthstone game, but at the same time, it's so much more unsettling because it just wasn't. Like, what actually happened here?
You win.
The hand off, I mean, the Flesh Giant off the top just ruined che0nsu's entire plan. I also wonder whether or not it was intentional, because I think if he was absolutely sure that he was going to discard Flesh Giant, then you do go for the tap there and go for the discounts as soon as possible. Because we could have seen if that tap came down sooner, potentially a Flesh Giant on one turn earlier, maybe it would have made a little bit of a difference. In the end, Glory's hand had all of the damage. So big yikes how that turned out.
Yeah, it's kind of what you expect from Demon Hunter, but I will say at the same time, it was the dream hand, right? He got 1 drop, a bunch 2 drops to populate the board, then he got the damage to follow up there afterwards. There's very little that Zoo can do against that, even if they do draw the really, really good starting hands, which obviously che0nsu did not quite get a hold of with the Giant, coming off the top at the worst possible moment. But while you and I were perplexed as to what happened, or I suppose I, more so than other casters maybe, were perplexed by what was happening there, we did see Glory giving us the thumbs up, the kind of the signature Japanese trademark at this point of winning a Hearthstone game, and clearly very relieved, very, very excited. Because at this point for him, he's already going through to the World Championships, but there's pride on the line at this point. He's gone from being amongst the best of company with Possessi and Alotemu right up at the top to having a so-so performance through the Swiss, pretty decent but nothing insane, and now needing to turn things around and do a good job again in Division A to prove that he's still up at the top.
Yeah, and no better way to do it than to beat che0nsu in his first round, I would say, because che0nsu is the player that you and I were touting as the one to watch this season, alongside maybe Alan. And che0nsu definitely looked very comfortable, even bringing a hat on the stream. So for Glory, that is a big relief off his chest. For che0nsu, though, it's going to be a bit stressful coming back in loss that beginning, because I don't know about you, Derek, but if I'm going to come on stream with some flashy, I don't want to start it off with a loss.
Yeah, it's a bit of an embarrassing way to go. I mean, maybe it was a consolation hat to comfort him in the case of a loss rather than a bragging hat in the case of a win. But either way, with that out of the way, Zoo being played from che0nsu there in a slightly weird way, but one player who I'm sure would have plenty to say about that Zoo play is Tom60229. Coming up next,